Hello and bonjour, I'm Sarah Bukhari and you're watching Power Dilemma here at TAG TV. Viewers, we're going to follow Donald Trump's policy on immigration and very controversial images coming on TV about kids detained in these detention centers. First of all, we're going to talk about a story from The Guardian. A senior manager at a child detention camp in Texas close to the Mexican border spoke on Donald Trump's zero-tolerance immigration policy that had been tearing migrant families apart as dumb. Speaking to journalists in what he said was an individual capacity at the end of a special supervised media tour of the facility in Tornillo near El Paso, Texas, the manager, who asked not to be named, called family separations a dumb, stupid decision. All it did was harm children, he said. The manager works for the private contractor BCFS, which is running the camp on behalf of the federal government. This operation would not be necessary had it not been for the separation. Despite an executive order from the president last week ordering that families would no longer be separated, 23 children at the camp in Tornillo remain apart from their parents or guardians after crossing the border with them. At the controversial facility of 22 large tents on the outskirts of the tiny town in western Texas, journalists were told that in addition to the 23 children who had been separated, 326 had entered the U.S. by themselves. Only 14 of the 326 children were girls who are housed in separate tents from the boys. The Guardian and a small group of other journalists toured the site on Monday morning after pressure on government agencies to show more transparency. The government says it has made a start on reuniting the more than 2,000 children who have been separated from their parents. But the process has clearly only just begun. In sweltering heat in the dusty little town where fencing keeps the camp of neat brown tents mostly out of sight of the public, the manager said, "I'm totally against the separation. The children appear to be well taken care of in terms of their basic physical needs." During the press tour, several dozen boys were seen playing soccer on an artificial grass field. A few teenage boys and girls told The Guardian they were good. So, this was a little story by The Guardian. Today in our panel, we have Mr. Ali Naqvi, who is an immigration lawyer, as our participant. Welcome to my show, Mr. Naqvi.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for inviting me.
And we also have Ms. Crystal Smaldon, who is a political consultant with the Republican Party. She has also worked with Vice President Joe Biden. Welcome to my show, Crystal.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so my first question is to you, Crystal. I would ask you, why put kids in cages?
You know, Sarah, I wish it were as simple as kids in cages. You know, there are lots of children who arrive with or without people posing as their parents. I think a lot of the photos that you're seeing are not exactly what is occurring in reality. Children are well taken care of, and in many cases, children are better taken care of when they cross the border to safety. So, you know, it's not that the president is plucking children from their mother's arms and throwing them into cages. What we are doing is following the rule of law at this point and making sure that children that do enter the United States are taken care of properly.
What do you think, Mr. Naqvi? What is the need of putting children in cages?
Sarah, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm not talking to you as a lawyer. This is a U.S. matter, and I'm not called to the bar in U.S. I'm talking to you as a social democrat, as a refugee advocate, as a father. Mm-hmm. And as somebody who has studied in the U.S., I did my master's from University of Pittsburgh, master's of law, and the U.S. I saw was very, very different. It was very compassionate. It was loving and caring and nurturing. and I have fond memories. And I did volunteer work for an organization in those days which helped the refugees, and I saw and I compare our Canadian volunteers with the American good people who were looking after the refugees in those days. They were coming from mostly Muslim countries, interestingly. However, going back to the children, as far as I understand, through what I have read, a lot of what's happening is that when parents and their children come in at the border and seek asylum, instead of putting them through the civil immigration violation codes, a lot of them are charged with misdemeanor under the criminal code, criminal law, for entering the United States illegally. And that entitles, and the madam on the other side is very correct. According to the U.S. law, when somebody is charged with a criminal activity, a misdemeanor may it be, the children cannot be put in jail, but the children are then sent to the immigration detention centers. And the new thing about all this is not detention of children. The new thing about this is the separation of children from the parents, and parents being sent, hundreds and thousands of miles away to one detention center and the children to the other. Mm-hmm. And I believe that the U.S. government is splitting the children and sending a message of deterrence and saying, you dare to come to the border and seek asylum, and we will take your child. And that is what is so heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm. But is it, Crystal, is it just that, is it just to see these images where kids are taken away from their parents? Just elaborate on that. Or if they're not parents.
Here's the thing, Sarah. The images that most people are referring to were actually images that were taken under the Obama administration. Mm-hmm. This current administration does not rip children out of their parents' arms and throw them into cages. What this current administration is doing is protecting the borders by saying everyone who wants to seek asylum is welcome to do so through a legal port of entry. If you so choose to attempt to make an illegal access to the United States of America through a non-legal port of entry, you will indeed be charged with entering illegally. Now, let's be clear. They have the choice to enter a legal port of entry and have zero repercussions for that. Or they can make the choice to enter an illegal port of entry, which is not even a port of entry. They choose to jump a bridge, jump a wall, whatever they choose to do. That's a choice these parents are making. But let's also be clear. More parents that are not parents when they arrive at the border. There are people trafficking these children across the border. Many children are arriving without any kind of adult with them. So the images you're seeing from the Obama administration are really the concerning ones to me. The images that are truthful of the current administration are not being shared. They're not being spread. And the reality is these parents are making a choice. They can make the choice to enter a legal port of entry and claim asylum and have zero repercussions, or they can make the knowing choice to enter illegally into the United States of America and have to battle with the separation of being detained. That's the choice they make. There's a consequence for everything we do as adults. They are aware they are breaching the law, and so there will be consequences.
What do you think, Mr. McKay?
But you cannot have the consequence. Yeah, if you want, you have capital punishment in U.S. If they commit a crime that entitles them to a punishment, punish them. You cannot punish minor children. You cannot detain. You can put them in protective custody. I believe you are claiming that, but you cannot detain for a violation that a minor has even willingly committed. This is international law. This is U.S. law. I studied that law in U.S. So the first question is whether it's a policy or not. And all the lawsuits that have been filed, especially by ACLU, clearly try to prove in the federal court that this is a policy. And it's not only the Immigration and Customs Enforcement (ICE). It's also the Department of Homeland Security, the Customs and Border Protection, and the Office of Refugee Settlement. All of these are hand in glove in this policy, and we are hearing about this for the last couple of weeks because now it has come to a larger volume, if I may say that, and we have seen those images. But it has been happening since 2017, 2016. There have been lawsuits since last year. There is a Brazilian lady called Mrs. C who's trying to get united with her child. There are Mexican families whose children have been, and it's not only Arizona or California. This is also people are being held in Chicago and people are being held in New York. So the concern is, yes, you have a law, that is American law, and you have the right, of course, to implement it. But you cannot prosecute, and I would say actually persecute, a minor child for an act committed by his or her parents. And this is what is concerning to me. And you know what? We Canadians are not saints as well. We detain children, but we don't separate them from their parents.
But there has been a concern from the other side that the children could have been allegedly accompanied by child traffickers. Crystal, do you want to say something about it? And then Mr. Naqvi can speak on this.
Yeah, Pedro, and you know what? I agree with what he's saying 1,000,000%. I don't think there's a single person in the United States of America that would want to see a child persecuted or prosecuted in any way, shape, or form for the illegal actions of their parents. And that's not what we're doing, right? You've got to understand that a lot of the children that we're speaking of, they cross the border with people trafficking them into danger. They're not being detained. These children are receiving health care. They're receiving schooling. They're sleeping in a bed at night with warm blankets and a pillow and people around them who care. We aren't taking children and plucking them into a detention center. That's actually not real. That's not reality. What we're doing is trying to ensure that the people that they're coming across the border with, who have thorough documentation to prove they're the parents, are actually the parents. Because it would be irresponsible for the United States of America to take these children and hand them back to child traffickers. And I don't think anyone in the world can argue that point. The point of this administration is to protect these children, to make sure they're with the people they should be with. If their parents had entered in a legal port of entry, none of this would be happening. Because if you're entering an illegal port of entry, that immediately tells us that something is wrong somewhere. And we need to have a conversation. When these children come, we are not hurting these children. We are giving them the things they've been lacking everywhere else. And in many cases, we're saving their lives from trafficking, from violence, from assault. These children are being well taken care of. There will be, in any situation, random incidents of problems. That's going to happen no matter where you go. But this administration has been committed 100% to the safety and security of children. And I can tell you that these children are not in detention as much as they are being cared for by people who care very deeply for their well-being.
So what do you think, Mr. Naqvi?
So what the lady across the border is telling us is that all the U.S. media that we get to see and hear and read in Canada is incorrect, except for, of course, the Fox News. My humble submission here is, even if there is one child that has been separated from his or her real parents, one is too many. Secondly, you can make allegations against anybody. There are kids who are 17. You cannot ask a child who the parents are. This is what, even if you don't have a birth certificate, there are ways to determine if these are children of these people they are coming in with. I believe, once again, these are false allegations, to say the least. There may be child traffickers, yes, but these thousands of children we are talking about, dozens of photographs and hundreds of photographs that we have seen. Now, some may be incorrect, and I don't care if it's Obama or Mr. Trump. From day one to now, they are presidents of the United States of America, the greatest country in the world, the democracy we all want to be, the freedom. We look at the harbor of New York and we say that's what it's all about. And we see children being detained, well, maybe not in cages, but they are not free. And they are being given, yes, video games to play with, but their parents are being taken away. These are their children, according to U.S. media, who are being breastfed by the mothers. Now, the photographs may not be right, according to the lady, but the facts are there. Even you narrated a story by prison official. I'm talking about there are congressmen and senators who are speaking against it. So if it's all just fantasy created by Democrats or otherwise in the United States, I don't think so. There are responsible people, responsible Americans speaking against it.
Okay, moving forward, my question to my worthy panelists, Mr. Naqvi on one side, Ms. Malden on the other side, is Donald Trump is the elected president of the U.S. Isn't it his right to save his country from illegal migrants? Whoever wants to go first. Crystal, you want to take it?
Absolutely. Okay, sure.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Naqvi.
Okay, Mr. Naqvi, yes.
Thank you. Absolutely. However, he has to uphold American law and international law. Yes, America is not a signatory on Convention Against Torture. We all know that. But America is a signatory on conventions for child protection, UNICEF. Yes, United Nations Human Rights Council have been kicked in the butt, excuse my language, by U.S., and that's fine. That's their prerogative as well. There is international law in the world. There is, and you know what? A lot of international law has been inspired by American free democratic institutions and laws. And suddenly we see this abrogation of laws by the Americans themselves. And it's deeply concerning because the message going out is we rule America and indirectly the world with executive orders. Now, yes, there are checks and balances. Supreme Court made three land, big decisions yesterday or the day before. They are going to affect positively or negatively on generations to come. You have the Supreme Court. You have the judiciary. But just making allegations that these parents are not the children's parents and separating the children because of misdemeanors or criminal allegations from the parents, even one child separated from the parents is one child too many. I have full faith in United States. I don't have faith in Mr. Trump, but I have full faith in Americans that they are going to stand against it and they are going to ensure, like the President Trump did make some amends with the current latest order where children will not be separated anymore. But the problem is the children who are already separated may take years to be reunited with the parents.
What do you think? What do you think, Ms. Malden?
I fully agree with the first line he said, which is, we can't allow illegal activities to occur, and the United States has the right to protect themselves from these illegal activities. And so I agree with that 1,000,000%. In fact, that's exactly what we're doing. What we are doing is saying, if you go ahead and you enter the United States illegally, when you have the option to do it the appropriate way, there will indeed be a consequence. And that is how society works. The United States of America has the right to protect their sovereignty, their borders, and their freedom. Who doesn't have the right is people trying to come in with the inappropriate way of doing that. And that's exactly what this is about. And that is the point that people are missing, is that if these people followed the rule of law, which is enter in a legal point of entry, none of this would be happening. But as long as you continue to try and enter the United States of America and break our laws, you will be punished. We have the right to do that as a society. We have the law behind us, and we have the right. Every single person can go through a legal port of entry and seek asylum, and there will be no consequences to that. But the moment you break the law that America is built on, you will expect that you will be dealt a consequence. It is very easy as adults in this country to be able to say, but what about the kids? What about the people fleeing? The United States does not owe the rest of the world free entry into this country because you so want to be here. You must earn it. And you must do that by entering a legal port of entry. There is no other way.
No, it was a wonderful debate. We are just short on time. Thank you very much, Ms. Crystal.
No one in the world, including President Trump, has the right to detain children under U.S. law or international law for crimes that these children have not committed.
That's why they're not detained.
So we are going to, it was a very healthy debate, Mr. Naqvi, Ms. Smalden. We are going to continue this story next week, and I would love to have you next week as well and continue debating on this topic, because I wanted our viewers to have two sides of the story and have a balanced approach on what is going on in the United States. Again, I'd like to thank Mr. Naqvi, who is an immigration lawyer in Canada, and Ms. Crystal Smalden, who has been a political consultant with the Republican Party. Thank you very much. We're going to take a short break, and we will continue later. Thank you.
Greenish Hair, Skin and Nails formula is packed with all the essential nutrients like biotin, omega-3, vitamins, and minerals to provide your hair, skin, and nails the nourishment that it needs. Like all other Greenish vitamins and supplements, the Hair, Skin, and Nails formula is gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, and non-GMO. It is also halal, kosher, and veggie certified. So make Greenish Hair, Skin, and Nails formula a part of your daily healthcare routine.
Welcome back to Power Dilemma here at TAG TV. Before the break, we were talking about very controversial immigration policies of Donald Trump. After the break, we have a very good panel with us, and we're going to talk about the Progressive Conservative win. They are going to swear on the 29th of June, and we have our very worthy panel with us. Professor Nelson Wiseman from University of Toronto. Welcome to my show.
Thank you.
And we also have our regular speaker, Mr. Ari Laskin from Capitol Hill Group. Welcome to my show, Ari.
Thanks, Sarah.
So this is the first time the PC will form government in Ontario since 2003, with leader Doug Ford expected to be sworn in as Premier in the coming weeks. The PCs released a long list of promises before the election called a plan for Ontario, but didn't include a detailed fiscal plan or a path to eliminate the deficit. That raised eyebrows as Ford campaigned, repeatedly promising, "We are the only party that's fiscally responsible. We are the only party that is accurate." The plan included a wide variety of promises, from a pledge to reduce hydro bills by 12% to reducing income tax and reforming education. So my first question is to you, Professor. What do you think? Are they going to fulfill the promises made to the voters?
Well, they're very general promises, except when you get a specific number like lowering 12% on hydro costs. I mean, yeah, they can do what the Liberals did. They could just pile the cost of that onto future taxpayers. But, you know, they also talked about firing the head of Hydro Ontario, but they can't really do that because it's a private company, although they own, I understand, 47% of the shares. So that's one specific province. promise, but most of the talk was general. I mean, reorganizing the education system. I don't know what that means. There are constant reorganizations. I don't know how it would actually work in practice. And I think they've already admitted that there's going to be a deficit in the first year, and I can't believe that they could eliminate the deficit in 2 or 3 years. At best, they could try to lower it. And given the uncertain economic outlook, we don't even know if government revenues are going to be as healthy in the future as they have been in the past couple of years.
Okay, what do you think, Ari, is the Ford PCs, the new progressive conservative government, are they going to, number one, fire the hydro man who was earning $6 billion, and how are they going to reorganize education and health?
Well, I think that the professor is absolutely right. It's going to be very difficult for the premier designate to go in and just fire the head of Hydro One. It is a privately owned company, albeit the Ontario government owns 47% of it. I think that if they were to go that route, then you're probably looking at some pretty strong court challenges that they would lose on the labor front, and rightly so. That being said, I do think that you're going to see some changes in terms of how energy is being not delivered to Ontarians, but how that infrastructure is being managed. A lot of the overhead that we saw with hydro is going to the bureaucracy, and by bureaucracy, I'm not talking about the public service. I'm talking about corporate bureaucracy. And you have the head of Hydro One making $6 million plus. That to me is a little hard to swallow. So when the premier designate said that he's going to fire the head of Hydro One, I don't know how much I would take that to heart. I think the goal there was to identify that there's going to be some serious oversight that's happening in terms of public spending. If you're going to be charging Ontarians that amount of money for their energy, then you best not be giving yourselves bonuses and saying that you need more money from the province. In terms of reorganizing education, that's really going to be a very large question mark. We don't know who the Minister of Education is going to be. Tug did say that he is going to repeal the quote-unquote controversial sex education curriculum, and he's going to go back and consult with parents. I do think that most Ontarians, regardless if you believe in the sex ed curriculum or you don't believe in the sex ed curriculum, I find it difficult for most Ontario parents that have children in the public school system to say, no, we don't want to be consulted on what's being taught to our children in the schools. So for him to go back and say that we're going to actually speak with the parents and we're going to speak with the people that are going to be impacted by this, I think that's actually a responsible move rather than issuing an edict down. How that reorganization is going to happen, as the professor said, it happens on a constant basis, a consistent basis, and I'm not sure how much more drastic we can take things.
So my question is here that when leaders campaign, they make a lot of promises to the voters. Do their promises change in real life when they come to power? Professor, you want to maybe take it?
Yes, they do. And that's because conditions change. And governments have to live with the reality of what they've been handed from the last government. It's easy to make promises. And actually, I don't really think that the policies proposed by the parties counted very much in the election. There was a very strong appetite for change. And we have to remember that the Conservatives issued a very, very elaborate platform. I think it was maybe 76 pages under Patrick Brown. And it promised all kinds of different things.
People's Guarantee, that was it called, I guess.
That's right. And the striking thing was that the support for the Conservatives was around 40% when Patrick Brown was in power. With that platform, the support for the Conservatives was around 40% or a little more when Doug Ford was the leader. So it tells me that the specific issues didn't matter that much. There was a lot of baggage that the Liberals had, and people wanted the Conservatives. And the other thing, going back to your introduction to this segment, Sarah, is that the public has this view that Conservatives are better fiscal managers, that more of them have business backgrounds. At the same time, they have the view that the NDP is better for social policy, for things like education, health, other social services, and that the Liberals are generally in between there. Although under Wynne and McGuinty, the Liberals have been more center-left. And historically, they've also had periods in Ontario's history when they've been center-right, as when John Robarts and Bill Davis were premiers. So I guess my main point is there was just, and the Liberals knew this, that it was going to be it was going to be a real challenge for them to win this election. So they themselves aren't surprised, although they're shocked by the fact that they only won 7 seats. And one of the issues which will now come up is whether the Conservatives should give the Liberals official party status so that they can
that was supposed to be my next question, yeah. So what do you think, what do you think, Ari, promises made during campaign, are they different in real life when leaders come in power?
Yeah, no, I would say that they are absolutely different in real life when they come to power. And it's not because the leaders were trying to mislead anybody during the election. I think that there was a lot of assumptions that were being made because in a lot of cases, the books are not open at the same level for the opposition parties. So assumptions have to be made. But to take a point from a former prime minister, rather, an election is no place to talk about serious issues. Kim Campbell said this, and that actually sank her. But there's actually some truth to that matter, that campaigns are a lot of sound bites. And in this day and age where we're looking at a 24-hour news cycle, those sound bites are no more than 15 to 30 seconds. And it's tough to explain and really flesh out a policy in that amount of time whilst keeping people's interest and also not trying to put your foot in your mouth. So I think in this case, when you looked at the election, and much to what the professor said, platforms didn't really matter for much. This was a change election. And the ballot question had been the ballot question for, I would say, the past 3 years. Are you happy under the Liberal government, or is it time for a change? And Ontario spoke, and they thought it was definitely time for a change. In terms of the Premier and the Conservatives granting party status to the Liberals, I'm of the mind that I don't believe that's appropriate.
Yeah,
but I think that that's going to be very much up to the Premier-designate to decide and his caucus.
So what do you think, Professor? Liberals should be given a party status?
No, I don't. I think we should go with the rules. Why? Because, hey, those are the rules. I mean, I didn't hear anybody saying before, don't change the rules after the game is played. And the NDP for sure would be against it. But, I mean, if the Conservatives want to do it, they'll do it. I think if the Liberals win some by-elections in the next couple of years and can boost up to 8 seats, they should get it. But failing that, no, I don't. Moreover, look, you have to have 8 seats with given the size of the House. And the size of the House has been increased since the last election. So, if anything, I mean, you might want to change the formula, but I don't think you should change it right after the election. Change it before the next election.
Complete your thought, please.
Well, that's my idea. I just think that everybody fought the election knowing that you have to get 8 seats to get research funds. Having said all of that, I don't think this discounts the Liberals. The Liberals have a very strong brand. And we saw in the last federal election that the Liberals came from a distant third. They only had 34 seats, and they ended up winning, 184. So they can catapult over the second party and go from third to first. I wouldn't count that out. I wouldn't bet on it, but I wouldn't count it out.
So Ari, Professor said that no, Doug Ford should not give Liberals a party status. What do you think, Ari?
And I would agree with the professor. I think that we do have rules that are set in place appropriately, and there's a lot more to just getting party status than being considered a party. There's money that gets allocated accordingly. You get a certain amount of money going to resources at Queen's Park. You get a certain amount of money for communications at Queen's Park if you are a party status. If you're not a party status, then you don't get that money. This is a matter of the rules were agreed upon by all people that entered into this race. As the professor said, I don't see anybody saying that they want to change the rules. I also don't see any of the other parties really thinking that it's appropriate for the Liberals to be considered party status. You even speak with Mike Schreiner, the leader of the Green Party of Ontario, and he said no, they didn't win the right amount of seats. They shouldn't be a party or have party status, just like the Green Party shouldn't have party status. These are the rules that this legislature was established upon, and these are the rules that I think that we need to abide by.
How is Doug Ford going to look upon by the rest of Ontarians if he doesn't give Liberals a party status?
Honestly, I don't think anybody's going to really blink.
Professor?
Well, I agree. Because the Liberals will still get some media attention. They're not going to get as much as the NDP, but that would happen whether they got official status or not. I'll point out one other thing that official status means and what not having it means. If you don't have official status, you don't have the right to be on legislative committees. Now, I believe the leader of the Green Party is arguing that that should be the case, but it's only official parties that get automatic representation on legislative committees. And now the committees have become more and more politicized, more and more partisan. They used to be a lot less than that. That's been my experience appearing in front of committees where they essentially argue the party line rather than being more open. The idea is that in committee you can actually start proposing changes to the legislation that then goes back to the House to be voted on. So in that sense, the Liberals would also be cut out of that. How big a difference it would be, I don't know. But it means that they wouldn't be as exposed to the kinds of nitty-gritty debates that are going on around specific pieces of legislation. And not having research funds is important because, look, the people that get elected, they're not specialists in different areas. You might have been elected and you're asked to be the critic for education. You may not know much about education or natural resources. So you use that money to hire researchers that help you prepare for what it is you're going to say and to give you information and facts that you can use to cast light on what the government is doing, proposing, or criticizing them, whatever.
What is the big thing, the first thing Doug Ford and his entire team are going to take upon in the first term or the first few months? Professor?
Oh, well, Doug Ford says the first thing he's going to do is cancel the cap and trade the system that Ontario's in, and California and Quebec have taken him at face value, and they've already closed the market to Ontario firms. So I think he's going to carry through with that. He also promised that he's going to fight the imposition of a carbon tax, which is what Ottawa is going to do if Ontario gets out of cap and trade, which I'm sure it will next week formally. But I think he's just whistling in the wind. The federal government can impose, according to the Constitution, any mode or system of taxation, just like it imposed the GST. Provinces weren't excited about that, but Ottawa, under a conservative government, imposed it, and it's just the law of the land, and that'll happen to Ontario. They can try to fight it in court, and they're going to lose.
What do you think, Ari? What should or should not the Premier designate do in the first few months?
So I think that, as the professor said, yeah, they're going to be addressing the cap and trade system and the federal carbon tax that's going to be coming down. I'm not so sure, though, that the feds are going to be putting forward a carbon tax. If you looked at the Financial Post today, there's some really interesting information in there about how much this is actually going to cost for families. So I think that maybe if Prime Minister Trudeau wins a second term, that may be something that's coming in there. But this close to an election, It's not a very popular policy going forward. So I don't know how that's going to actually play out. The other thing, though, that I think that the Premier designate Ford is going to have to focus on, whether he wants to or not, is cannabis. October 17th, 2018 is the date that it becomes legal, and Bill C-45 is fully enacted. The federal government said if the provinces don't have their own regimen in place, they will put one in place for them. I know full well that that is not something that will fly or even pass the smell test for a Ford Premier. So he's going to have to make sure that he has a very comprehensive policy put in place, and one that is very clear and precise. So I do think that you're going to see marijuana and cannabis as being one of the very first things that are going to be acted upon by this administration. Cap and trade has been spoken about for the entire campaign. They pulled out of the cap and trade regime from Quebec and California. As the professor said, the businesses aren't able to apply for credits anymore, and they're fully out of that system. So I think that that's going to also be something that they're going to have to reconcile. How is the money that was supposed to be gained from cap and trade and applied to various programs, how is that money going to be recuperated?
What do you think, Professor, about marijuana and the legalization of marijuana in Ontario and Doug Ford?
Well, it's been legalized, so that issue's over. Okay, let me say something both about carbon tax and cannabis. I understand that the federal government already has the legislative authority to introduce this, and I'm convinced that it's coming in on January the 1st, and that most provinces have accepted the fact that that's a reality, and although they're making noise about it, including the new government of Ontario, they're not going to stop it. And I also don't think that the federal Liberals can postpone it or will postpone it past 2019, because they'll be called out on not meeting their commitments under the Paris Climate Accord. In fact, even under the Climate Accord, I don't think they could meet the commitments they're making. And the carbon tax that they're going to impose will be in a way hidden. I mean, costs will go up for people. I suspect the cost of a trade war with the United States is going to have even greater implications than the imposition of this carbon tax, which is not very high. On cannabis, well, a lot of conservatives are opposed to the legalization of cannabis. I don't know what Doug Ford's position was. I mean, he used to be a drug dealer himself, according to media reports, and he hasn't successfully or even tried to sue the media about it. I think the rules that the Liberals have put in place, I mean, we're getting close to October 17. I don't think there are going to be hardly any changes. I think, it's probably going to come out of an LCBO store. They're not going to reinvent the wheel, and we're going to have how it'll change the behavior of people, whether it'll limit organized crime, whether it'll limit the use of cannabis by youth. I'm skeptical about all of that, but I think I think the conservatives are reconciled to the fact that it's going to happen on October 17, and if it doesn't happen in the LCBO stores, if they want, they'll open private stores, or they'll give people licenses to open them. They got to do it soon.
Okay, it was a wonderful participation by our two panelists, Professor Nelson Wiseman of University of Toronto and Mr. Ari Laskin from Capitol Hill Group. Thank you very much, my worthy guests. And we're going to talk to you in coming weeks. And that was all for today. Keep watching Power Dilemmas with Sarah Bukhari. Ciao.